Good afternoon, and welcome to Comm Collective's Talk Today with four incredibly exciting and inspirational speakers. And we are going to be talking about the now normal. I'm Patti Carpenter. I'm the founder and principal of Carpenter & Company and Trendscope and a global trend ambassador with Maison Objet and a contributor to Pantone. And today with us, we have three incredible people. We have Nancy Fire, we have Leigh Ann Schwarzkopf, and we have Tom Mirabile. I'm sure that you know all of them, but I'll give you a little bit of an insight, and then we're going to have them talk about themselves as we move into this. Technically, I'm a moderator, but we discovered that we had such a lively conversation that this is really much more about us bouncing our ideas back and forth and feeding off of each other because it interests us. So we're assuming it interests you, but no, we know that it's really fun to do that way. So initially, I just want to give you a little bit of insight as to who we're hearing from. So first I'll start down on the lower left in my screen. I'm not sure where she is on your screen, and that's with Nancy Fire. And Nancy calls New York City home, though she is an avid globetrotter. I know this because I've run into her all over the world. But she keeps her finger of the pulse of global trends through her design company, which is DesignWorks International. She's got a 30-plus year she has 30-plus years of experience and was formerly the design director for HGTV and for HGTV Home. But she has recently launched nancyfire.com, which she's going to give us some more insight about as we move along. But I do want to say that she also was a market style spotter for High Point for 2020, and that she is also a certified green leader, which is really important to her. We've had some conversations about sustainability, and I know that's going to come up in a topic.
Absolutely.
So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We have Leigh Ann Schwarzkopf, and Leigh Ann is a founder and the principal of Project Partners Network. You have to say that 3 times fast. And she focuses her time on supporting clients with innovation and new product development through insights. Licensing is an area of expertise which we know very well, and one she considers in nearly all innovation work because she has frequently said, you often can get farther, faster with a borrowed brand or equity. And I think that that's going to really certainly be important as we move into this post-COVID timeframe as well. Those partnerships and collaborations are going to be even more important. She's a frequent speaker at various trade association events and a former board member for the International Licensing Trade Association. And she's taught non-traditional retail at a Minneapolis university. So welcome, Leigh Ann.
Thank you.
And then last but not least, Tom Mirabile. Hi, Tom. He's a principal and founder of Springboard Futures, a trend service firm, and he specializes in consumer analytics and insights and with the home category specifically as a focus with trend developments. He also serves as a global consumer trend forecaster for the International Housewares Association, IHA. They just did they're in the middle of a great series of talks. Today they did responsibility, which was really fascinating. So if you haven't heard those, you can go to his site and get those. And he is a contributing editor with Pantone. So that's actually where we met, although he has a great retail background and experience as well. So welcome, everybody. It's good to see you all on this hot day in New York. I know we're all over. Yeah. It's kind of stifling here. So as we talk about the new normal, actually, as we were trying to decide what we wanted to call this, Tom came up with the idea for what the name was. So I wanted to start with you in terms of what made you come to that name, and then how we all sort of gathered on to say this is in fact a perfect idea about what we want to talk about today.
Well, I think there are 2 things. You know, first, I say the now normal because first there is never going to be a normal again, not in our lifetimes, you know, and second, I mean, normal is a moment to moment, it's a state of being, okay? So it's, you know, normal may only last 2 weeks, it may last a day, you know, and we have to get used to dealing with things on a really short timeline. I thought it was really interesting. The CEO of Target did a webinar last week with the National Retail Federation, and he said, you know, a lot of people are looking 12 months out, you know, 18 months out and trying to predict what's going on. We're looking about 2 weeks out. Absolutely. And you know, I mean, you can't, you know, of course, at a certain point you have to plan, right? But at the same time, you know, I think that we have to really improve our alacrity without, you know, with looking at things in the very near term and being flexibility.
Absolutely, absolutely. How does that play out for you, Nancy, now that we're that I know you've even moved offices. You're not even working in the same place that you were previously.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Thanks, Patty, and thanks, Tom, for that. My reality started on March 16th. I was overseas, and I flew back on the 16th, only to be whisked out of JFK to, we have an old house that we've been renovating for the past 20 years. So I'm in my attic office, and this happened, you know, all of a sudden, because here I was, my reality was, what is going on? Basically, my recovery, okay, was like I left the city kicking and screaming, and my recovery after 3 nervous breakdowns, because you have 17 employees, you have a studio in New York City, you're living in New York City, you're sequestered, you can't go back to New York City. What do I do? So literally after 3 nervous breakdowns, I focused, and I was able to sort of recover, knowing that I knew that my new normal would be different. Yeah. And now I'm thinking about my road to renewal, which I'm going to be kicking and screaming going back to Manhattan, because I'm hearing words like trusted, classic, familiar, embrace, peaceful, tranquility. People are being very positive about who they are going forward. And like myself, I want to manage my time. So it was interesting. We're opening our studio again August 3rd. So we're very excited. We're moving downtown by you. But it's my new road to renewal. Everything is new. I launched my new website, which allowed me to do my consulting more full time than just being in DesignWorks, which has been amazing. But lately, things like positive things are popping up. So yesterday, which I'm sure you all know, John Furner from Walmart announced that Thanksgiving they're giving their employees off.
Oh, right,
positive thing, right?
Right.
It's amazing. And then in August they're all getting 3rd round bonuses of $150 to $300. These are retailers. And the reason why I'm saying that, it's transparency. We're now seeing the retail emerging with people at the helm that understand that to engage with your consumer, you need to engage with your employees. So I feel excited that there's this rebirth happening. And I'm working with many retailers, and they're all saying the same thing. Like, we get it. We need to readjust, and that is really what we're going to be and do, because we want to be that transparency that you see. So that's really how my reality came from reality recovery and road to renewal.
And my first article that I wrote when we first got into this, like you, mid-March was sort of the same time frame that it hit me. And that first article I wrote, and I think, Tom, you and I were talking about it, I had all the re's. I said I was feeling like Aretha Franklin because I kept talking about rebooting, rebooting. So I feel like certainly the conversation. And for you, Leigh Ann, where you're dealing with people who are talking about licensing and all of these kinds of things, how are they looking at this road to renewal, and what are there optimistic things that are coming out of that in your world?
Yeah, I mean, first, stepping back like the rest of you, it's been a dramatic adjustment. I'm used to being on the road, maybe 50% of the time. I go to 40 trade shows a year, looking to see what's coming down the pike, how you can make connections, how you can, create those magical experiences. And boom, that came to a stop. So you start thinking about, where else can I get inspiration? And I found that, one of the, I'm certainly not a Pollyanna. Those who know me will say you're one of the most jaded people I've ever met. But there's this underlying, I don't know what I call it, there's like this great equalizer going on where information is available to virtually anybody. So as you create your plans, as you try to figure out best ways to re-engage with your consumer, who is no longer your customer, they're just people. So what do people worry about? How do you engage with them? How do you think about them? And I loved what you were talking about in your earlier presentation today, Tom, about, if the people who buy your things are worried about sustainability and corporate responsibility, how do you do that? So I think there's a great sharing of data and data and information. And one of the most striking examples of this was Target issued, and if anybody on the call or anybody wants it, just reach out to me, a 62-page, I think it was, directory on how do you make people feel safe in the stores? What are the protocols that you should be doing? And they said this is for everybody. And that, first you think about, well, that's kind of strange because Target would never be sharing that information. But the idea that if we all get better, we all get better.
We all get better.
And I just think that's just a great way of thinking of it, the sharing the information, the ideas, the inspiration. And that was, you know, when we had our little prep session last week, I was just so jazzed because I think it's a great time to be, you know, doing what you were talking about, Nancy and Patty. It's like reevaluate, recharge, come out strong. And I think this is kind of a unique, we have permission to reinvent ourselves. We have permission to make mistakes. We have permission to grow. And I think that's happening. And you asked me about licensing, but that's happening in licensing too, whether it's the kind of partnerships or whether the kind of contracts that are written. And, you know, whether it's the focus on new or the focus on comfortable, nostalgic properties. Somebody last week or a couple weeks ago said, nostalgia is the comfort food for the soul. And I love that statement because I think it speaks to how licensing can integrate into your portfolio. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and turn it over.
No, that was great, and it led me into something that I also wanted to talk about, and it's interesting. And Tom, I'm going to start with you with this because but you all did a talk on wellness. But I was reading a white paper just yesterday that was saying that, you know, prior to this, we were all talking a great deal about wellness and sort of taking care of ourselves, but it was a much different type of care. And that now the new, what has become new in the now normal is that it's not about wellness, but it's about well-being. And well-being encompasses not only the concepts that fall under wellness, but also the concepts that fall under sustainability, that those things are coming together, that it's actually even turning the whole idea of the Maslow triangle on its head, and the things that were at the base are now becoming the top, and the things that were at the top are now moving to the bottom. So as we're talking about this idea of wellness and well-being, Tom, I know you just did a talk on wellness. What do you think about that, and how does that sort of play out?
Wellness has gotten so broad that it really affects every category. And I think one of the great things about it is it's become very, you know, wellness in the 80s and the 90s, and even at the beginning of this century was almost, it was exclusive in a way. Okay. So it was about body, it was about body image. It was about being sort of up here, you know, the top of the food chain, literally and figuratively, of what you ate. You know, you ate the best or the most rarefied, you had the perfect body, you had, you know, everything was a matter of exclusion and of measurements. And now it's very, you know, wellness is what it means to you, you know, and COVID has actually drawn an emphasis on, you know, whether it's meditation or, you know, it's given opportunities to so many categories that are like, you know, what is wellness to me? Well, wellness to me is being able to sleep better, you know, or it's, you know, so every category can touch it. So it's really important that way. But one of the things that about the pandemic that I think is just brilliant, and it affects anybody in retail, or it affects any business, is that this is the first experience we've all had that literally, you know, even when you think about a war, okay, everybody experiences it differently. Different generations, parents experience different than the people on the front, than you know, than kids, than singles, than marrieds. And here we are experiencing it in real time, the same way, and many of the same parts of the experience, barring for a moment the illness aspect. But we've all know somebody or have lost jobs. We've lost people. We've lost loved ones, and it's created this systemic empathy that has changed our industry. It's changed every industry, because now it used to be, before this, everybody, marketing in general was about, you know, you had to, I get you, you know, my brand gets you. Now it's about I am you. Yeah. You know, I want to be, you know, I need you to understand, you know, so you go to a bank and ask them for, you know, anything, and they will talk to you about, you know, so how's your family doing? I mean, it's like there's this humanity that has burgeoned. It's wonderful. Yeah. You know, but it drives through to product. It drives through to every aspect of our business. Everybody's in an emotional business now.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. No,
Nancy, I was going to say, I think it put a balance in everything from your work life to your home life to, you know, kind of thinking more holistically without giving it lip service. I mean, in true holistic point of view.
Exactly.
Well, that's what licenses, Leigh Ann. I was fascinated on some of the stuff you were telling me about how nostalgia plays into licensing, and and it's true. Like, what TV shows are you watching right now? All of you, like, you're reaching back and looking at I Love Lucy and Hulu and stuff. I mean, what does it mean for licenses, though? Are we seeing changes in that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's most interesting right now is Hollywood. Is it open? Is it closed? When are the movies coming out? Can people go to the show? So if you can't, as a retailer or manufacturer, plan as effectively products you want to bring in. So those classic properties are really coming back into play. And I think it speaks to an emotional connection as well as a very practical connection. And prior to this call,
for all generations, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And prior to this call, I was doing some research. There's new data that was just published, but on a global basis, there's close to $300 billion worth of licensed product that's sold, which is in a three-year growth is 11.4%. So that speaks to the way that consumers are connecting with brands in a new way. And I think that what we just talked about, Tom, the whole idea of, and Nancy and Patti, the whole connecting with things that remind you of your childhood, or that are simpler and easier to understand, or accessible.
Classic board games.
Whether it's food or whatever, is very important.
Board games, puzzles.
Well, let's say, and Nancy, you're doing a lot of that with you make product for people, so you're connecting around how it's made.
Yeah, so I wanted to add a few things because I love the whole nostalgia. Like, I totally agree with that. And coming from like the food arena, we're seeing slow cooking and slow baking. And it really started from the very beginning of COVID, when there was the yeast shortage.
Yes.
Because you're looking at, like, people really wanted to bake sourdough bread and they couldn't find yeast. So from that, these trends have transpired in food, like nostalgia, like baking bread again, doing things that take a while in the kitchen, beautiful gourmet meals because we have the time, less meat. A lot of people eating less meat, and they're adding mushrooms and veggies to their, so they're thinking of wellness through food, as we were discussing. But most interesting are pantry meals, because when I grew up, my mother had a pantry. We didn't have a pantry in this house. This is an 1890 farmhouse. I literally carved out a closet, and now I have a pantry, and people want to cook from their pantry.
Yeah.
So all these nostalgia things are coming back. So it reminds me of my mom, who did that. And I was always, everything was fresh and everything was always in that moment. So that's one thing. The other thing about sustainability for me that I want to just touch on is it's really great to see, like, Gen Z really caring about sustainability. We're looking at 25-year-olds today that are clearly buying a brand and a product because it's sustainable. So coming from my, training this past, I guess, month or so, it's wonderful to see that the youth today is really caring about that. Therefore, the brands are caring about that, and they're caring about that connection, whether it's licensed or not. They're caring about that connection, which I think is so important. I was reading something about Nike. I guess you guys probably read that too, about their CDA. So they're doing this consumer direct, like, acceleration. And what they want to do is they want to make sure that they have the right people reaching out to their consumers, and young consumers, because young consumers truly are buying Nike as well. Right. But they're putting the right people in the right places who understand Instagram, how to sell on Facebook, how to sell through different platforms. So again, it's like the retailers are reconnecting with what's happening with the consumers. And also it is through sustainability, because there is such a big brand awareness today on how sustainable you are and what your transparency are. I mean, do you guys feel the same way?
No,
oh gosh, we just had a huge.
That's how the trading.
Sorry, I missed that.
I mean, yeah, at the end.
I'll send you a link to it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
No, I mean, it's enormous. And what's interesting, you're talking about Gen Z, is this is just pre-COVID. Who was it? It was Pew, I believe. Pew Research came out with a statistic saying that 93% of Gen X parents say that they are directly influenced by their kids when it comes to buying any product for the home.
I am.
And it's, and it's so there's wonderful. And because honestly, if you don't consult them on the front end, you're going to hear it on the back end. You bring something in the door and it's like, what are you doing with that plastic bag?
Yeah.
It's like, so, it's
Yeah, they're being driven, but they're driving it. It's coming from the youth up. They were the first ones to sort of say, I mean, look at, we talk about it all the time, the example of the plastic straw. Where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
That was driven by kids saying, we don't need to be drinking out of this, look, the turtle with the straw in its nose. Everyone saw that image and it changed the industry completely. It's that
But you know
idea
what's
of being
great?
driven bottom
That's
up.
such a perfect example, because that example really shows you how when retailers listen to consumers as opposed to waiting for brands to do it,
Right.
you get a gross to net that's much faster.
Absolutely.
So in that case, you had brands and companies following consumers, and it's just
yeah, and I just want to add to that, and because you said this before, Tom, just think parents like myself are listening to that generation. So when we see a retailer who's actually doing that, we're jumping on that.
Right.
So that's that transparency I'm talking about.
Plus, I never would have watched that video if a 13-year-old hadn't put it in my lap.
That's the point. It was driven from the children up.
Yeah.
Right.
And Leigh Ann, do you find that now in terms of working with brands that they're feeling that push from the consumer to do the change, to be the change?
Oh, absolutely. But what I wanted to add something to what you said before, and again, the kind of this great equalizer thing, that this doesn't have to be just big companies and big retailers that do this. Mom and pop stores and almost any neighborhood store can get behind a local cause or something like that and really speak and engage to their consumers, and I love that. But yeah, there's a big spin on that. One of the examples that I've shared with Tom before is the whole idea of Disney, and they've created a whole platform on better for you foods. So they recognize that in everybody's life you need some treats and stuff like that, but those shouldn't be every day. And so they've heard that from their consumers and the parents. They've heard that from Wall Street. So they've actually made a commitment that I believe the number is 85% of their food portfolio will be better for you, and 15% is not. And they take that very seriously. I know people who have heard, no, we won't license with you because we want to make sure we keep this commitment that we've made to our consumers and to
when
Wall
you look
Street.
at the
And I think
menus on
that's
the
just
site,
astonishing. What'd you
so
say, Tom?
good. What you pointed me to their site, and when you look at the menus, they don't just talk about eating better. They don't just make food products that are better for you. They show you how to make meals. They give you recipes, hysterical, like characters created on plates. I mean, it's a whole experience, which I think is an interesting thing that we're seeing in licensing and in general is brands are jumping over the retailer and communicating with the consumer and creating relationships directly, which is very important.
You're absolutely right. And one of the books I'm rereading now is called The Experience Economy, and I recommend it to anybody. And the author's premise, I heard him speak last week, was that if we don't get the experiences right, the economy is never going to recover, because we've moved beyond a system that just cares about things, and it's not even just about service, it's about the whole connection. And one of his examples was duct tape, and I thought, what's that all about? But he's talking about all the colors that is in duct tape, the contest on making a prom dress with duct tape, the Halloween costumes you can make with duct tape, and that's a people talking to a brand then that can go to retail about how to have fun with this and how to not only solve the problem but make it fun. And I think people are starving for that, especially now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I just want to say that's great to hear, Leigh Ann, because we went through a period of licensing with just brand slapping, like just names on packaging and images and products and celebrities, and I feel and even influencers, right? Like we've had that whole thing about influencers, like who's really an influencer and why, and what is reality. So hearing that in licensing makes me smile, because I'm glad that the big brother organizations are really saying what they mean and meaning what they say. So thanks.
I think they are, and I think they're doing shorter term collaborations to prove that here's something that's timely, here's something that is on topic, here's something that makes sense.
And one of the things that I've also been hearing with regard to that is that it's moving away from the bigger names. So, for lack of a better, one everybody knows, and that way you don't call out too many people, but it's moving away from having a Kardashian be the person that is the, the spokesperson for your thing, to smaller,
Thanks, better now.
to smaller people who really are, it's about the value and
Right.
that value exchange, because these are the real people that are using your thing. So it's moving from people who have maybe, far fewer followers, but are really truly in touch with your brand and connected in the way you
Exactly.
want them to be.
Yeah.
Very,
And
very
that's-
authentic. And there's
And transparency. I mean, again, we go back to that word
Absolutely.
transparency, because that is exactly what everyone wants. They want reality, not reality TV, but reality day to day of what we do and how we do it. And I think it's just so important. I mean, I feel so uplifted because, we're coming out of this time that has been so dramatic. And, as Tom was saying, like what is the new normal and how long does normal last? Well, I feel very invigorated going forward, because I feel like there are people like us that can take all of this information and just move forward in a positive manner. So I'm just, I'm
So,
all
Can I ask you,
as we
can I
talk
ask you a
about
quick
the
question
oh,
about,
sure thing. Go ahead, Tom.
sorry, I know that you, I just, so many questions. Like, what role does content play now? Like,
Mhm.
you're like the content queen, so I'm gonna ask you, but like content, it seems to me like content has become more and more important, like self-generated content, like that people using products and things like that. And how is consumer content in terms of its relationship to manufacturer content? Are they both important? Is it, should manufacturers be sharing their consumer content and ratings and reviews and visuals on their sites? Like, what's the evolution of content if content still is king?
Yeah, is this directed to me?
This is directly to you, yeah.
Yeah, content is king, but it's real content. And I don't mean reality TV content. It's content of, I'm going to follow someone because they truly are working in their garden and I really like their tips. I understand, I can relate to them. It's all about relatability, but in a more intellectual way, which I think is fantastic. There are so many things happening right now that I'm reading about that just give me that warm and fuzzy feeling. Like I read about, have you guys heard about Pop Share? So
Yes.
Pop Share
Yes.
is where these shop owners and landlords are coming together and they are determining what the rent will be because it depends on how much that person is selling in their store.
Right.
So that type of content, Tom, to me is exciting because I'm going to follow those people because that content to me is what people are looking for today. It's reality. It's how we're living and it's solution based. So I feel like solution based is where we need to be. And I'm not talking about move the pillow 3 inches to the left and your sofa looks great. I'm talking about real stuff. Like how can a mom and pop store afford to be where they are? Well, if they're selling X amount and they're paying X amount, duh, it works. So when I read about things like Pop Share, that's the content that I'm seeing. That's the content that I'm seeing people on different platforms relating to. How many of you are following on Instagram like good people, right? All the good stuff that you're, right? I need to see. My feed, I have to say 75% is uplifting. What are people doing? So that's the content I'm seeing. Moving away from, that reality TV that's garbage. So
also moving away from the fear. I think when we started talking about
absolutely.
one of our big drivers for this whole webinar was, can we just please stop talking about the negative and talk about the opportunities this presents?
Because I have to say, like, I went through 3 months of negativity and nervousness and here I am, and I've been in the business 33 years, and I couldn't get my act together because I couldn't imagine me not being in New York. I couldn't imagine me not traveling like you guys do, a half of the year. I couldn't imagine my new normal just retiring. It just, nothing made sense to me. So when you lose that fear, you start to think clearly and you manifest things that will come to you. And I know it sounds weird, but it's so true because to me, like we were talking about wellness before, right, Tom? My one word for wellness is time. It's given me time. And the time has given me the allowance to think. And by thinking, I could re-strategize my life where before I'd get up in the city, I'd take the subway, I'd get to my studio. I would eat lunch in my studio, I'd take the train home, and that was my day. My day now is so much more interesting. I might be doing 48 and 24 because, you could work till midnight. But the reality is that we all seem happier for what we're doing, right? And I think we're loving what we're doing and loving giving back. So content to me going forward is transparency. It's intellectual properties that people understand. It's licenses that people want to be involved in because they're real. So it's really about the real.
But it's also, I have to say, and sort of piggybacking off what you're saying, one of the things that certainly has been coming through quite strongly is that we've been doing things very differently because we've been forced to. But now, having done them, we don't want to go back. Just what you're saying. So people are talking about they want to have meals with their family. And it used to be, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because you were running in from one
Right.
and you were running out to the next thing, and just preparing was a problem. Now it's about something that you enjoy doing with the family, and we don't want to give that up. We really want to continue to build that into what our days are going to look like.
I heard a great presentation just earlier today, and it was directed at the restaurant industry. And he said, your new competition is not the operator down the street. Your new competition is the cupboard.
Yes,
it is.
Speaking, it's how you balance that whole thing. The content thing, and I'm sorry, I'm like a data junkie here, but when you talked about what kind of content resonates with people, I pulled out some home decor categories, and publishing properties, so like magazine properties and home, Joanna Gaines kind of home things. 13 billion out of that 21 billion is done in those categories. I thought that is an astonishing number. Wow. And then the next highest one is entertainment properties, which is 1.5 billion. So think about how that's
what we're doing, right?
With people. It's all about content and making me feel good and making me feel comfortable and genuine, and I see how it's done, and I trust and I believe and all that great stuff. So I think there's great opportunity for authentic content to come through.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, and notice how like all of a sudden it was like HGTV at home. Like people were bringing
right
home. Okay, so the content was more real because you can see David Bromstead on his sofa in his silk pajamas talking to you about like what's the next normal or what's going on. So you're all of a sudden like you're sort of spying, but in a you're allowed. It's like legal. So I think people were just relating to that, like the ability to understand people more on a realistic level, and I think that's so important, So yeah.
Patti, you said something that I want to go back to that I really liked, and I think it's worth expounding on. That you said we found out that we could do this, whether it was cooking or whether it was baking or whether it was whatever we wanted to do. We found things that we like to do with that little extra time, whether it was commuting time or putting off real work until midnight, and we're not going to give that back.
Not gonna even
and I think that's one of the things that Springboard works on is we work on trend aspirations, like aspirational trends. So we talk about what are the 5 things that people want more of. So forget generations, forget incomes, forget the typical demographics, psychographics. There are certain things everybody wants. Everybody wants more time. Everybody wants more space. Everybody wants more experience. Everybody wants more responsibility. Social and environmental, and everybody wants more wellness. So it's like when we look at that, it's like time is such a, statistically, and I'm kind of a data junkie like Leigh Ann is, but statistically, we have more leisure time than we have ever had before. Before COVID. Before COVID, we Americans in particular worked an average of 20 minutes less per day than they have ever before, since all the way back to 1940. We feel more stressed about time than we ever did, but it's because now there's a wealth of things we can do. We can learn new things, and we're expected to learn new things. We're expected to evolve. So time-saving products, space-saving products, super important, because now that we're in those walls and we've got that little extra time, I just wish manufacturers would think beyond the next great color. Not that I don't love that, but it's like, if I'm making a meal, save me time doing it so I can really enjoy it. So
and make
products that
go on, continue.
No, I mean, that's that's it.
I just get so excited about this, and the idea of making quality time. So it's quality with the family, quality creating something. It's I think that's another thing that has been off the charts, is like people. Yes, they're terrified to spend time with their kids, but they're really enjoying spending time with their extended families. The idea of school is, got everybody, everybody's all tied up in knots, but I don't think people want to give that back, like you were saying, Tom.
Don't.
They absolutely
yeah.
don't. Everything that I'm hearing says that they don't. And what's interesting to me, and what I mean, I want to, before we get off in so many different directions, I do want to get a sense of what kinds of products do we think are going to come out of this. Tom, you started down that path, but this whole idea of, if we're going to look at things differently, what are we going to want from our manufacturers in terms of the kind of products that are going to afford us the ability to do this? And then, sort of how do those shift and change? I know we've been talking about things that are multifunctional, if I can throw that out there at the beginning.
Duality.
Yeah, so that it does, exactly. It has that duality. So do you want to build a bit on some of that?
Duality and multifunctionality and things like the modularity, they all save space, and that's wonderful. And it's really important now. And especially now that we've got so many people, 60% of Americans said that they would prefer to spend most of their work time at home, even if COVID didn't exist.
Right.
Now, understand that last year, the prediction was that 40% of Americans would feel that way by 2030. So we have to look at how trends have been amplified. It's like, it's all of a sudden things are in hyperdrive. Of course, nobody asks how much more time I want to spend with my husband, who's now out walking the dogs at 4 o'clock when he was supposed to walk them at 1. But that aside, I think that we look at time and we say, and also, Leigh Ann, you said a word, quality, that I think is, especially in food, it's really important. We want to be able to create restaurant quality. We want to be able to create bakery quality. And so that that loops us into social media. It gives us bragging rights. We can share things that we make more easily.
Yeah,
but sharing we used to talk about sharing, and we were talking about social media sharing, right? Now, sharing is just as much a physical, in-person thing. We seek experiences that let us share. We bring Monopoly into the house. We drag out the Pictionary. We drag out the cookie sheet. It's like all of these things that we're getting in touch with experience. So how do you deliver that with product? The part of delivering experience is saving time on other things. So don't leave out Roomba and the new vacuum that you don't even have to empty this thing. It goes, it docks, it empties itself. All these things. So saving time makes room for that experience that you want to spend on other things.
Exactly. And that whole idea of sharing being an in-person thing now versus the technical, digital kind of share is really
IRL, in real life.
Right. A major shift to where we were sitting just 3 or 4 months ago. That whole idea of not only sharing the picture of what we did, but sharing the actual loaf of bread with the people that you were with. Or one of my favorite things is, I live in an apartment in New York. I don't have a lot of space, but half my friends have homes with gardens. Can I tell you, the fresh basil, the fresh mint, the fresh tomatoes, the leek, all of them, they're sharing their bounty. It's that whole idea of sharing all of these things. And look what we grew. Look at the size, this sense of pride that we take in all of those things. Leigh Ann?
And some of the fear of failure has also gone away. So I can make things, and it might not, I'm going to aspire to the restaurant quality. There are limits. That same session I was talked about the places people crave that they'll never try at home. That very few people are going to try and become sushi chefs. But the idea of, I can make mistakes, it can still be fun, it can still taste good. And so what if my bread's oozing out over one side of the pan? It's still a great experience. And
what Nancy said about the real, that is so resonant with me, because the real, the mistakes you make are a part of the process now. They're a part of the socialization.
I always say imperfect is the new perfect. And I think all of us have chilled a bit. So it's okay if we goof, because we laugh at ourselves. I mean, when was the last time you got to laugh at yourself? I mean, I'm so serious all the time because I have deadlines and all these things. So I just feel like everyone's pulling back a bit. But, like Leigh Ann said, quality is just really important in everyone's mind. This sort of independent thinking, like, we can do this, your confidence is back.
Yes.
But
trust is a big one that is returning. And this whole idea, and as you talk about brands, that's certainly one of the foundations now. But I was reading something, and I'd be interested to hear you all's take on this, the idea that there will actually be a return to some brand loyalty, but that's going to shift a bit. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it means following following blindly with one brand. Because we made, as an example, you may have ordered a certain toilet paper in the beginning and they were out. So you shifted to another brand. That brand was able to be in stock and was able to satisfy your need. If it satisfied the need, are you shifting completely to a new brand? Or now are you open to having two brands in your life? You know, that kind of conversation with how are we going to look at brand loyalty? Is there going to be a pivot or a shift there? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think it's interesting because I think we're going to be surprised by brands that are reinventing themselves, brands that, you know, didn't have the transparency before, that are working really hard to sort of come out of that and be real. Leigh Ann, I'm going to leave this to you because, you know, this is your world. What do you think about that?
I mean, there's a lot of research out there that talks about brand loyalty is at a crossroads, that that people are open to trying new brands, that if they've had a great experience, they'll stick with it. But I think there's that innate trust in brands, whether it's brand A or brand B. I think there's still an innate trust in it, with the caveat that a brand is kind of a decision maker at the shelf. It can't be a brand at this price and the generic right here. I mean, it's got to be pretty darn close, because this is going to be, you know, you have to offer the consumer value. But I think a brand fits in something with licensing that Tom gave a presentation to the licensing industry a couple weeks ago, and we were talking and preparing for that. And it's the idea of brands can help you figure out not only who you are and where you want to fit in the world, but where do you belong? Who's your peer group? And I thought, you know, that was just a really nice way to capture it. So I stole that from you, Tom, but I mean.
No, we did it together, but I really liked the way it wound up. What we were saying was, whether your brand is a store or your brand is a product, are you a, how do we put it? You kind of fall into one of two channels. Either you're a unifier or an identifier. So unifiers are brands like Disney, where it's about the shared experience. Am I bringing a bunch of people together as a group that appreciates something? Comic-Con, you know, or am I an identifier, where I help people identify who they are? So Martha Stewart, you know, she helps you create yourself. Food Channel,
Still does.
an identifier brand, you know. So they're both, yeah. But I mean, there's definitely a Venn diagram in there, but you're usually lean one or the other. But the problem with some retailers is they don't have a position. They let the brands they carry identify them, and that becomes problematic.
Right.
You know, I mean,
And that kind of leads into a topic we were discussing, and I'm sorry, I'm going to lead this over, but you know, everybody gets totally freaked out about retail and stores closing and stuff like that. And I think some of it is, as we talked about, overstored, but some of it is there's not enough of a differentiated experience. If I have the same experience here as I have 6 blocks away, why do I need both?
Right. And that's been happening for a long time. I think COVID just sort of like cleaned it up pretty quickly. And I think the retailers that are coming back are smart, because they're getting rid of the stores that really are not performing, and they're focusing on the stores that are. And what Tom was saying is, you know, some of these retailers are sort of formed by the brands they have, but now I'm starting to see retailers reverse. And this is our sensibility. So these are the brands we believe in that can be in our store. And that's pretty amazing, because it hasn't been that way for a long time.
Yeah, and that I think is what's going to, I personally miss the days when, you know, I was just using this the other day as an example, when a Marshall Fields existed, because it was a very particular type of retailer, and it had its own.
Now we're dating ourselves.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter for
who's
me.
Marshall Fields?
That means we have experience and expertise. But it's that idea that there was this little gem, this little nugget that was its unique self there. And when they got rolled in, it lost something. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't the same, to your point. It was the same as the one 6 blocks away. And why did I need both of them? Whereas before, when they had this unique identity, and I personally long for the time, and I'm hopeful that will also be a time that brings back the smaller lifestyle stores, that smaller stores can get a hold and get a foothold again, because they can identify where they are with the people they are locally. They have shared, you know, shared experiences in an area. They can have local product, but it can really bring a different value, you know, to the equation in terms of what they bring versus the big box stores. So that I'm
Because it's interesting. I'm seeing more of that online. I feel like the mini online stores have really nailed that.
Yeah.
It's the mom and pop stores that haven't. I mean, if we all had to think of a retailer that we love for a certain reason, like I think of Terrain, right? I think of that store when I go there. I feel like they nail their customer, whether you're buying a plant, if you're buying something, you know, for wellness, if you're eating in their cafe, they have a certain feel that other stores do not have. And I feel like what you're saying is like these stores need to come back and have their own identity. Or if you're like a Macy's, you need to figure out who you are and how you're going to implement those identities into your store, because you as a store believe in that brand.
In something, yes. And I feel like that's a very European way of looking at retail.
Absolutely.
You find that, in my experience, much more in Europe than you find it
Or
here.
at least we did.
We did. Exactly. We won't find it for a while. Tom, you were going to say?
Well, we had talked the other day, and I really hope, I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. Is, you know, I really believe that the next hero of the pandemic is going to be small business. And we've got to make that happen on both sides. We've got to make it happen on the consumer side, but also, you know, manufacturers need to enable that. You know, we have to enable a longer aisle, maybe not an endless aisle, but we need to enable a longer aisle for smaller retailers, assortments, enable dropship programs with smaller minimums, you know, do whatever we can, but it's not just everybody looks to the consumer to save small business. It's going to be the industry that saves small business, you know, and we have to create programs that enable it in and among ourselves. You know, look, honestly, it's easier now. It's a problem that's created a solution where a lot of orders aren't going to hit MOQs. We're not getting a lot of orders. So, you know, everybody bend a little bit and we'll save this shit. Sorry. But, you know, but the other thing is, we were talking about brand loyalty. I think the great thing is it's a great land of opportunity to create new brands, because it's the flip side of brand loyalty being kind of, you know, is people have never been more inclined to try something new.
Right.
You have to have a differentiator. It's got to be like a better technology or better performance or whatever. But it's you know, there's some great opportunities for new companies and new brands and new ideas, and for brands to create new companies.
Yeah,
I agree. But, you know, when you talk about small business and retail, I agree with you. When you think about small business, you know, in neighborhoods, it's really the real estate. You know, and that's the killer. That's the root of the evil right there. So that's why people like PopShare, when they're coming up with ideas on how you could work with your landlord to figure out what is fair, to me, that's the reality of small business. Because if not, I mean, before COVID, New York City, I mean, every block had 2 or 3 stores empty, right?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, the West Village, Hudson, was horrible.
And my neighborhood on the Upper West Side, I mean, you walk down the street and some blocks were empty. So I really believe the evil comes from real estate for small businesses, and it's a struggle.
I agree.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree. Well, in Canada, in Ontario, they're buying up lots and creating spaces out of containers, stacking containers, and they're bringing in artists to do great, you know, art on the containers. And then under the containers, they've got retail spaces, and they're a collective.
Yeah.
So, you know, you still pay for space, but it's nothing because they're just paying for a lot, you know.
But it's so frustrating because there's so many stores and they're empty, and until the landlords cannot write off their rents, this is going to continue. And what happens is then people move out of neighborhoods because there isn't a neighborhood anymore. And that's really what's happening to our precious city. Yeah. So I think the frustration for me is we could support small businesses all we want, but they can't even be in business because they can't afford to be in business. So, you know, that's something I think we all have to figure out and, you know,
and work together.
Really get involved in, honestly. I mean, not to be a Debbie Downer, but to say like that is that problem, and that's something we all collectively need to fix.
Right.
Well, that's probably another opportunity coming out of this, because there are so many businesses that are struggling.
Yes.
That real estate is going to go down. There are companies that have said, gee, I don't have to bring everybody into the office. Rents are going to go down. But I do you know, Tom, what you were saying about kind of reinventing yourself. There's a local store here. It's a kitchen and home and gift store. And they've done some remarkable things. I mean, they went online right away and said, we'll do curbside delivery. Then they provided content and said, we will deliver it if it's over X amount. And they were also known for renting equipment. And this will sound kind of strange, so bear with me for just a second and I'll keep it short. But they rented out these giant paella pans. So if you were having 50 of your closest friends over, you could rent out the thing and they would, you could have this big paella party. Nobody's doing that. So what did they do? They flipped and started doing food service, and they created a reason for you to visit with the store. They created an ongoing love for new stuff. So if you let them know by Wednesday they would have paella for your whole family, you could pick it up on Friday on your way home. And that's as a houseware store. I thought this is a beautiful reinvention.
That's a great way to reinvent.
That's somebody who's thinking and who's connected, and that's what we need more of. This innovation that's going to be born out of this time is really what's fascinating to me, why I'm so optimistic as we talked about it. So, we don't have a whole lot of time, and I can't be on a call without talking about color. So what do you all see as directions for what's happening as we get this rebirth and renewal? Where do you see that leading us in terms of the kinds of colors that are going to emerge out of this time frame? I'll start with you, Nance.
Okay, so for me, also coming from sustainability, I am still seeing a lot of timeless. So I'm seeing natural colors. I'm still seeing the sky, the sea, the forest, and sand.
Yep.
Neutrals were big before the pandemic. I think people are looking for soothing colors. With that said, blue is still number one because it is soothing. It is the sky, it is the ocean. But I am seeing also pops of color coming in. People want pops of color in their home. They're not looking for a whole orange room, but they're looking to pop color to sort of reinvent, because color, as we know, stands for so many different things. Yeah. So basically, the beautiful neutrals, sustainability. I feel blue is still something, but also so it's a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Tom, what would you say there?
Well, I'm gonna. You and I are 100% in agreement, and we've chewed on this cud until So I'm gonna let you talk about what colors are right and wrong. But I would say this: I think that one of the big opportunities in terms of product and marketing is to the revisitation of chromotherapy. You're seeing it in some small electronics. These, I was looking at this 27 option shower head that, will also, when you need to get energy, it'll shine yellow or orange light on you. When you need to relax, of course, the light has to be out in your bathroom, and I would probably kill myself within a day. But it's a great idea. You're seeing chromotherapy in LED candles, so you can stop it on a color. But color as wellness is a connection that we need to expand, because there's business in it for all of us. And the consumer wants it, so it's the effects of color, back to what Nancy was saying, those calming colors, a lot more natural mineralized colors. We had seen a move towards, you and I saw a move towards 80s neons in Paris before pre-COVID, Patty, and that's so we won't be seeing that. But
I have a couple questions. Someone just said, Shannon, how are you? Great webinar. What was the fifth universal want? Time, space, wellness, responsibility, and
experience.
Okay. And do we see the mega city trend dying?
It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to come back. That's my feeling. I think, it rotates. So every 5 to 10 years, there's a shift. I think for New York City, there's a big shift going on now. So it's going to take a while. It's not dying, it's changing. I don't think it's dying. I think
it's also going to depend on whether or not we can support the culture, because it's like you just pointed out, Nancy, the culture goes, no desire to be in the city.
Absolutely. Look at Broadway. Broadway's not coming back at least 21. They said last week it could be a little further. So, it is about culture. It is about neighborhoods. It's about communities. So if we lose all that, then it's going to take a real long time.
Yeah, I did see an announcement last week that the Met is looking at opening at the end of August. So if something like the museums and galleries feel safe to come back, I think that will certainly help. And yesterday on the news, I just saw people interviewing tourists that have come to New York. And there were tourists from Chile. There were tourists from Turkey. There were tourists from somewhere else in South America. I want to say Argentina, maybe.
Mhm.
And then one other place. And the guy was talking to them in Times Square, and they said, it's an interesting time to come because you can't go in everywhere, but you can see so much more. And so it's kind of, they had just come back from the Statue of Liberty because we just had that reopen. So, I mean, as things reopen, I think that certainly will also, you know, sort of to your point, the culture is what's going to keep New York thriving. I will make a point in terms of piggybacking off what you said, Nancy, about color, because I just have to talk about color.
You have to.
I completely, in fact, when Tom and I were in Paris at Maison, you remember we had this whole conversation about nature and the influence of nature. And I was thinking of even just doing my whole presentation when I came back based on the colors of nature, because I think those are, just as you said, the sun, the sea, the land, the air, the sand. That's the kind of thing that's really important. The one thing you didn't talk about that I do see is still very important. I even just watched a color marketing group thing the other day. The nourishing greens we've been talking about, those vegetable and herbal and nourishing greens, I think are still going to be very important. More on the olive cast, some of the teals. But I agree with you, those sky blues. And all the way into what we've been calling sort of the chambray sky, where it's that color of washed denim. You see so much of that relaxing fabric. It breeds the idea of trust and comfort. So I think those will continue to be
also
important.
those you were showing some great like terracottas, the clay colors, you know, really beautiful, very mineral, just really adoptable.
Desert-like, you know, the colors of the desert. So those warm,
and they look good on skin. You know, they're not the orangey end of it. You know,
absolutely, and that is here to stay because of global warming. So people are aware of the warmth of color.
Yes,
did a big presentation on that recently, and I have to say that it's something that we are still seeing. People are relating to the warmer side of color as well. So it's kind of like across the gamut. I guess it really depends on, you know, who you are, where you live, how you're feeling. As Tom said, you know, color is very mood, you know, inspiring. So yeah, it's just, it's a lot. There's a lot going on for color.
There really is.
And I'm not a color maven, but my only advice to the people on the call would be know who your customer is, because that's going to help refine all these great ideas that these color experts have. And I think there's different customers are going to appeal to different ones.
I love the colors behind you, Leigh Ann.
No, that's right.
I was just going to say the same thing.
I love those colors.
Yeah, no, right behind you. The painting is wonderful. We have a question that says, with regard to the regard to the reinvention of retail and retail spaces, how would the panel address making retail spaces feel more inclusive, even the small boutiques and online, so inclusive to all? Or do you think they're going to be more segmented because they're more focused?
Of course, I have a thought on this. Two things I'd say really quick. The first is right now we're dealing with a lot of surgical shopping, which is very dangerous. And what that means is we go into a store, we get what we want, and we get out because it doesn't feel safe.
It's like
Very tactical.
One thing that we can do to ameliorate the effects of that is stop expecting the people, if we're talking wellness, stop expecting people to go here for an atomizer and here for bamboo sheets and here, you know, get it all together, tell stories. Let's get back to telling stories. Families, you know, neighborhoods of solutions, families of function, so that you don't make them run around and you cross sell inside of a smaller space and instead of, you know, doing to square footage. And the, you know, the other thing is just that more people are shopping at home. Make sure that, I know we're talking about retail and store, but your online message has to be clear. You know, it really, you have to make sure that you're showing the right examples. You're really, you know, I hate to say it, you're Amazoning things, and you've addressed this from every aspect so they're comfortable buying it at home.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, that's one of the things that I always loved about a smaller lifestyle store was that they did tell those stories. They did bring things together from different, you know, different products from different producers, but you made this wonderful story that had the point of view or the aesthetic of the person whose small store it was. And so if that shop, you know, sort of worked with you, then that was something that resonated, then that was something that brought you in every time and time and time again. And I think that that's kind of important at this stage, is to understand that.
I mean, shopping needs to be an experience. You know, it can't be a task, and it's become a task. And I think once we bring back that experience, that lifestyle, once the retailers all have their own personalities again, this will help. And they need to be more inclusive of that, of understanding who they are, to bring people back into their store.
Right. Well, I'm going to give you all each a chance for last thoughts, and then I'm going to read this one fabulous chat that we've got at the end. So Leigh Ann, do you want to start off? Are there final things you want to share?
It's been a hoot and a holler being on here with you. I've enjoyed it very much. I think the key message is know your customer and think big, and don't let the times get you down, because there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of innovation out there.
Thank you. Nance?
I just want to say there's a lot of excitement going forward, and I think we just need to think smart. We need to be very present and very focused, and I feel good energy coming on, so I hope everyone else does as well.
Okay, and do you want to say anything about your nancyfire.com?
You can oh God, I feel like I'm on like an award show or something. Yeah, go visit nancyfire.com and you can see the annex of my Design Works International Studio, who I'm working with, the projects I'm working on, and love collaborating. So thank you, Pat.
And Tom?
I just, consumer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all there is to it. There is no business, not a single business will survive. Stop looking at your competition. The best way to compete is stop competing. Start looking at the consumer. Every answer is in their heads.
Yeah.
It's all in their heads.
Yeah.
It's all in their hearts. If you get Nancy said something before about, relating to, when you really get that consumer, consumer loyalty is here. It's not always here.
Right.
So get personal. Everything's personal now.
Someone said today on one of the calls that I heard, I think Warren Schulberg is the one who quoted it, but I can't remember who said it, that brands are a voice and the product is a souvenir. And I loved the idea of that energy of you're really speaking with a voice to a customer, and what they take away with them as your product is a small piece of that, but that you're really speaking to them on a much bigger level if you are a brand that they trust and resonate with. So that will be my final thought, but I wanted to read this to you because I got a kick out of this. This is what someone just wrote in. Man, I really want to have a dinner party with you all, just talk and eat and drink. This is a great Thank you, Kevin.
You're on.
So I think that means we did our jobs well. But thank you guys so much for being here and chatting.
It's been great.
Thank you to Tiffany and Comm Collective for hosting this, this hour of just being able to sort of.
So short, it should have been 2 hours.
Yeah, it's
I wish it could have been.
Go on forever and ever. But
Wait, Patty, I want to plug.
Plug.
Come visit Springboard.
Plug.
SpringboardFutures.com. Come see us.
You should have said that. That's what I asked you.
I know. I forgot. I was too busy talking about the world and making it better.
There you go. And if you need us, Patti Carpenter, Carpenter and Company, and we're there for your needs as well. Come join us. We're everywhere you do your digital shopping.
Well, you can hire all of us, and we can work together and collaborate.
We're easy.
And then
Cheap,
you have
but we're
a
easy.
party with eating and drinking.
Exactly. We're all good for a cocktail.
Right, exactly. Well, it's time for
Thanks, Comm Collective.
So
and
everybody have a wonderful
everyone.
Thank you, Comm Collective. Thank you, Tiffany. And we hope that we'll see you soon. But till then, everybody stay safe, sane, well, and inspired.